Hello, and welcome to our podcast, episode number 27. The truth about the last hope for humanity is finally revealed. I am Timothy, and I am here with my very good friend, Thomas. Today, we are going to talk about Cargo. There will be spoilers. Cargo is a 2009 science fiction film about a young doctor named Laura who signs up for a job on the cargo ship Cassandra to fund her journey to the distant planet Rhea. Upon discovering that Rhea is actually a virtual reality simulation, she and the crew decide to sabotage it. The film received positive reviews with an approval rating of 72% on Rotten Tomatoes. To begin with, I didn't enjoy the film. I just don't enjoy that genre. But Tom, so did you enjoy Cargo?
Well, I have to admit that I was quite intrigued by the premise of Cargo. The idea of humans living in space stations after Earth has become uninhabitable due to ecological collapse is a fascinating concept. And the fact that they've created this virtual reality simulation called Rhea to give them hope for a better future, well, it makes you wonder about the human capacity for resilience and delusion all at once. However, as far as my personal enjoyment of the film goes, I have mixed feelings. On one hand, I thought the production values were quite impressive considering it was a Swiss production with limited resources. The special effects and overall atmosphere of the ship were quite convincing. On the other hand, I found some of the characterizations to be underdeveloped or even cliched at times. But then again, maybe that's just me being overly critical. What about you, Tim? Did you find any redeeming qualities in Cargo, despite your general dislike for science fiction films?
Well, I will say this much for the film. The plot is engaging and keeps you guessing until the end. You never quite know who can be trusted or what their true intentions are. The reveal about Rhea being a simulation was well executed, and it does make you think about the nature of hope and reality in such dire circumstances. However, I do have to agree with you about some of the characterizations feeling underdeveloped. For example, Laura's motivations for signing up for this job seemed a bit vague at times. And while the idea of having an additional security guard on board due to terrorist threats is interesting, Samuel Decker's character felt like he was pulled straight out of any generic science fiction story. I found myself wanting more depth and complexity from these characters, especially considering their roles in the central plot.
You make some valid points there, Tim. The idea of using a terrorist threat as a plot device is not unheard of in science fiction films, but could have been executed better here. It felt like they were trying to add tension and suspense without really developing the characters involved. As for Laura, I agree that her motivations weren't fully explored. However, I did find myself sympathizing with her situation. She had a dream of starting a new life on Rhea, but had to work hard for it financially. The fact that she signs up for this job despite knowing how dangerous it could be shows just how desperate some people are in their quest for a better future.
That's true, Thomas. I can see where you're coming from with Laura's characterization. She's definitely driven by her desire to escape the harsh reality of life on these space stations and find something better for herself. However, I still felt like there was room for improvement in terms of how her arc unfolded throughout the film. As for other characters, what about Captain LaCroix? He seemed quite mysterious at first with his secrets about Rhea, but he ended up being just another pawn in the larger scheme of things. I found myself wishing they had explored more of his backstory and motivations instead of making him yet another character whose actions were driven by hidden agendas.
Captain LaCroix was an interesting character for sure. His secrecy about Rhea definitely added to the mystery and tension of the film. I agree with you, Tim. It would have been nice if they had explored his backstory more thoroughly or given him a bit more depth beyond just being another character hiding something from everyone else on board. But then again, maybe that was the point. In such a claustrophobic environment where trust is hard to come by, even seemingly innocuous characters like Captain LaCroix can have hidden agendas that threaten everyone's safety and well-being.
That's true, Thomas. It does make you wonder how much of the crew's actions were driven by their desire to protect themselves and those they care about, given the dire circumstances they find themselves in. The revelation about Rhea being a simulation does change the dynamics between them, but also raises questions about whether they can ever truly trust anyone again after learning this devastating truth.
Indeed, it does, Tim. And I have to say that I appreciated how the film didn't shy away from exploring these darker themes or making us question our own beliefs and values in the face of such a bleak reality. While some parts of the story may feel underdeveloped or cliched, overall I think Cargo does a decent job at tackling complex issues like hope, trust, and delusion while still managing to keep viewers engaged throughout its runtime.
That's true, Thomas. I think one of the strongest aspects of the film is its ability to explore these complex themes without feeling overly preachy or didactic. The performances from the actors also contribute greatly to this effect. For example, I thought Anna-Katharina Schwabro was quite convincing as Laura, a character who starts out rather naive but quickly adapts to her situation and grows into a more determined individual. Her chemistry with Pierre Semla, who played Captain LaCroix, added an extra layer of tension and intrigue to their scenes together.
I have to agree with you, Timothy, on the performances being one of the strongest aspects of the film. Anna-Katharina Schwabro did a fantastic job portraying Laura's journey from naivety to determination. As you mentioned before, Pierre Semler was also quite compelling as Captain LaCroix. His calm demeanor and mysterious air made him an intriguing character throughout the film. Another standout performance for me was Yang Zom-Broen as Yoshida. Her portrayal of a strong, resourceful woman in such a male-dominated environment added depth to her character and made her someone you couldn't help but root for.
That's very well said, Thomas. I also think that the choice of having an international cast with actors from Switzerland, Germany, and the United States contributed to the overall realism of the film. The diversity among the characters added another layer of complexity to their interactions and relationships on board the ship. It's clear that the director, Ivan Engler, put a lot of thought into creating a believable world within the constraints of the film's budget.
Exactly, Tim. I think this diverse cast also helped to reflect the international nature of the space program and humanity as a whole in this post-apocalyptic scenario. And even though some characterizations may have felt underdeveloped or cliched at times, the acting talent on display here manages to elevate these characters beyond their scripted limitations. This, combined with some visually striking scenes and an engaging storyline, make Cargo a film worth watching for science fiction fans and casual viewers alike.
Well, said Thomas, I think we can both agree that despite its flaws, Cargo is a compelling and thought-provoking film that manages to keep you engaged throughout its runtime. It raises interesting questions about human nature and the lengths we might go to in order to survive or find hope in seemingly hopeless situations. While it may not be perfect, it certainly deserves credit for tackling such complex themes in an entertaining way.
That's very true, Timothy. I think one area where Cargo really shines is its direction by Ivan Engler and Ralph Etter. The way they managed to create a claustrophobic atmosphere on board the ship, despite limited resources, was truly impressive. They did an excellent job of building tension throughout the film, especially during scenes that involved the crew's interactions with Samuel Decker's character or when they were trying to figure out who could be trusted. The use of lighting and camera angles also added depth to these moments, making them feel more intense and suspenseful.
I completely agree with you, Thomas. The direction in Cargo was superb. The way the scenes were shot made it feel like you were part of this tight-knit crew navigating through their precarious situation on board the ship. The use of long takes during intense conversations or action sequences added to the overall realism and immersion into the story. It's clear that a lot of thought went into creating an engaging visual experience while still maintaining focus on character development and narrative progression.
That's right, Timothy. They really did an amazing job balancing all these elements within the film. And speaking of balance, I think another strong aspect of Cargo is its pacing. The film doesn't waste any time getting straight into the action, but still manages to take its time developing characters and relationships without feeling too slow or dragged out. The plot twists and reveals are spaced out just enough throughout the story to keep viewers engaged without feeling overwhelmed or underwhelmed by them. It's a fine example of how well-paced storytelling can enhance one's enjoyment of a film.
Absolutely, Thomas. The pacing in Cargo was spot on. They did an excellent job building tension and suspense while also giving the audience enough time to process what was happening and get invested in the characters. Another thing I liked about it was how they managed to keep you guessing until the very end. You never really knew who could be trusted or what their true motives were, which added another layer of complexity to an already engaging storyline.
And lastly, let's not forget about the score by Peter Spatinsky. It perfectly complements the mood and atmosphere of Cargo with its haunting melodies and eerie soundscape. The music helps elevate key moments in the film, adding an extra layer of emotion or suspense when needed most. Overall, I think the direction, pacing, and score all work together seamlessly to create a captivating cinematic experience that stays with you long after the credits roll.
Very true, Thomas. The music did play a significant role in enhancing the overall viewing experience of Cargo. It added an extra layer of suspense or tension during intense scenes, but it also provided some much-needed relief during moments where characters were trying to process their emotions or situations they found themselves in. I think Peter Spatinsky did a fantastic job crafting the soundtrack for this film, and it's evident how well it complements Ivan Engler's vision for Cargo.
Well, said Tim. With its engaging storyline, strong performances, thought-provoking themes, and masterful direction, Cargo is a science fiction film that deserves more recognition in the genre. Despite some minor flaws here and there, it manages to deliver an entertaining and intellectually stimulating viewing experience that will leave audiences talking long after they've finished watching it.
That's true, Thomas. It's amazing how such a low-budget film could pack so much punch in terms of storytelling and world building. Now, speaking of trivia, did you know that the ship used in Cargo was actually built on a shoestring? Budget by using scrap metal from a former steel factory. This fact really speaks to the ingenuity of the filmmakers and their ability to create something truly impressive with limited resources.
That's incredible, Timothy. I didn't know that. It just goes to show how dedicated these filmmakers were to bringing this story to life, despite the challenges they faced. Another interesting tidbit about Cargo is that it was actually filmed in 4 different languages: German, French, English, and Russian. The actors had to learn their lines phonetically in some cases, which adds an extra layer of complexity to their performances.
Wow, I didn't know that either, Thomas. That must have been quite a task for everyone involved. It just goes to show how committed they were to creating a truly international cast and making the film as realistic as possible despite its sci-fi setting. And speaking of the film's setting, did you know that the writers drew inspiration from real-life space missions when creating the story? They even consulted with actual astronauts and scientists to ensure accuracy in their portrayal of life aboard a spaceship.
That's really interesting, Tim. I can definitely see some parallels between the film's plot and real-life space missions, especially when it comes to the claustrophobic atmosphere and the need for cooperation among crew members. It just goes to show that even in a sci-fi setting like this, there are still many lessons we can learn from our own history and experiences.
Indeed, Thomas. And now that we've discussed some interesting trivia about cargo, what do you think the future holds for Ivan Engler and Ralph Eder? Do you think they'll continue to work together on more projects or go their separate ways?
That's a great question, Tim. After the success of Cargo, both directors have gone on to work on other projects separately. However, they have expressed interest in potentially collaborating again in the future if the right project comes along. Personally, I would love to see what else they could create together, given their obvious talents and chemistry. Only time will tell.
That's very interesting, Thomas. And now, shifting gears slightly, let's talk about the cultural impact of Cargo. As we mentioned earlier, the film was produced in Switzerland and has a predominantly European cast. How do you think this might have influenced the reception of the film? Do you think it would have been received differently if it had an American or Asian cast instead?
That's a great question, Timothy. I believe that the cultural diversity in Cargo actually contributed to its overall appeal and success. By having an international cast, the film was able to attract audiences from different countries and backgrounds who could relate to various characters on screen. It also showcased Switzerland's growing presence in the global film industry, which is quite impressive considering its relatively small population. Now, if we were to compare it with an American or Asian production, there would certainly be some differences. For instance, American science fiction films often tend to have bigger budgets and more elaborate special effects, while Asian productions may lean towards a more artistic or surreal approach. However, I don't think cultural impact was necessarily the deciding factor in determining how well Cargo was received. It was more about the story itself and the way it resonated with audiences on an emotional level, regardless of their nationality.
That's a very insightful point, Tom. And speaking of cultural diversity, I noticed that some reviewers praised Cargo for its portrayal of women in leadership roles aboard the ship. For example, we have Yoshida, played by Yang Zom-broen, who is not only strong but also quite resourceful and strategic when it comes to navigating their dire situation. What do you think about this representation of female characters in Cargo?
I completely agree with you, Tim. The film does an excellent job of showcasing strong, independent women who are capable of holding their own in a male-dominated environment. This is particularly refreshing, given that science fiction films have traditionally been criticized for their portrayal of female characters as mere damsels in distress or sexual objects. In Cargo, we see a more balanced representation where women like Laura and Yoshida are allowed to develop into complex characters with their own motivations and desires, outside of the male gaze. Moreover, I think this representation is not only important from a cultural standpoint, but also sends out a powerful message about gender equality and empowerment in real-life situations. It's always encouraging to see films that challenge traditional gender roles and stereotypes while promoting diversity both on-screen and off-screen.
Precisely, Tom. And now that we've discussed various aspects of Cargo, let's wrap up our thoughts on this film. Overall, I think it's a fantastic example of what independent cinema can achieve when given the opportunity to shine. Despite its modest budget and humble origins, Cargo manages to deliver a gripping story with complex characters and thought-provoking themes that will stay with you long after the credits roll. It's a testament to the talent of Ivan Engler, Ralph Eder, and their entire crew that they were able to create something so visually stunning while still maintaining emotional depth and intellectual rigor.
I couldn't agree more, Timothy. Cargo is definitely a film worth watching for anyone who appreciates science fiction, or just great storytelling in general. Its exploration of themes such as trust, loyalty, and morality within the confines of an intense survival scenario is both engaging and thought-provoking. The performances by Samuel Decker and the rest of the cast are outstanding, making us care about their fates despite the limited screen time some characters have. And let's not forget about the stunning visuals and haunting score that elevate this film to new heights within its genre.
Exactly, Tom. It's been a real pleasure discussing Cargo with you tonight. We hope our viewers enjoyed our thoughts on this underrated gem of science fiction cinema as much as we did. And now, let me remind everyone watching at home to please subscribe and comment on this video. We love hearing your thoughts and opinions about the films we discuss, so don't be shy. Until next time, thank you for joining us on Tim and Tom's Film Nights. Good night, everyone.
That's right, Tim. And remember to hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode of our YouTube podcast. We have some amazing films lined up for future discussions, so we hope you'll join us again soon. Until then, good night and happy viewing, everyone.